Welcome back to Seriously Curious, a podcast about all things experience for business strategy and design. I'm Chris Rockwell. I'm president and founder of Lextant, a human experience firm here in Columbus, Ohio. And I'm super excited today to be joined by Heidi Munc of Nationwide. And Heidi, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me today, Chris.
So Heidi is VP of User Experience at Nationwide. It's a leading financial services and insurance provider. And she has a team of over 70 plus UX specialists. And she's an accomplished executive, a pathfinder, I would say, for Nationwide, what I've seen, thought leadership, and a talented designer. And then also just a talented travel enthusiast, a creator. Yep. I see all the things when I follow you on Facebook and Instagram. Civil servant now,
so servant.
Which I think is
Job
so
number
awesome.
2.
Yeah, that's great. And of course, a provider for your family and for the community. So thanks so much for being here today. Super excited. Today we're going to be talking about organizational maturity and user experience. You know, there's so many investments being made now in experience, not just at the product and service level where most of us have built our career, but now at the enterprise level too.
Right.
And so experience is like it's come to maturity. We no longer have to get on the mountain and say, hey, this is important.
That's right.
Everybody
we no longer have to beg for a chair to have a seat at the table. So,
everybody has the religion now. But then that begs the question, how do we get better at it?
Right.
How do we build an organizational core competency and equip an organization to be customer-centric?
Right.
And so that's what I'm hoping we can talk about today. And I think Nationwide's done a great job of that under your leadership and others. And there's a lot to learn there. So let's talk about that today.
Let's get into it.
Yeah, maybe we can start a little bit with you and your journey. Tell me about, how you've got here and in this kind of position of leadership in UX.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's kind of a winding path. And I actually love everybody's origin stories. It's one of my first, questions I ask, like, how did you get here? Because, for folks our age, there wasn't like there was UX school or, certification in it. So we really had to find our way. And for me, and I'll try to tell the story quickly because it starts when I'm 13, but I was watching the Super Bowl with my dad. It was 1982, and it was the famous 1982 Apple ad.
Yep.
If you haven't heard it before, go look it up. 1984, the Orson Welles Apple commercial. And I was so excited about it because it didn't show the product and I didn't know what it was about. Yeah. And I just went into research mode, like, what is this thing? And finally found where there was one of the computers in town, asked my dad to bring me there so I could see it. Yep. And I thought, oh, this is great. Like, that commercial changed my behavior and made me do something. Okay. I want to do that, which is kind of like advertising, right? Like we're talking the early 80s when I'm thinking about this. Yeah. But I wanted to do it for all the sort of like social good things, like teach kids not to smoke, don't litter, all that. What somehow got all the way through college with a degree to lead me towards advertising without anybody telling me that job doesn't exist, right? Like, that's your pro bono account. You really get to work on it about 4 hours a week, and the rest of the time you're selling stuff that people don't actually need to them. Right. So I was disenchanted, and right around then the internet was born, and I was super excited about the internet. This is going to democratize information. Yeah. It's going to level the playing field, kind of like equal things out in society. So I went and got a job at CompuServe, which I still absolutely adore. My years at CompuServe was so informative. Purchased by AOL. So it's like AOL, Netscape, CompuServe all together. Went through that for 9 years. But really the model was an advertising model. If you think about AOL back in those days, they were getting you to click on a bunch of things before they gave you the content. And I started to get worried when I was looking at search result queries where people are searching for things like breast cancer. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's some poor woman somewhere who's anxious and she wants to know about breast cancer. What are the symptoms? Yeah. And we're making her click 5 times before we give her information. Like, can't we just give her the information? So I was starting to develop the language of looking out for the user, looking out for the customer, really getting them what they need quickly. And that was kind of before UX was a term. Yeah. So I just kind of always wanted to be oriented that way. And it took a little while before there was a field for it. So, AOL, that whole story of demise, and that was right here in Columbus, Ohio. And I took a job with Nationwide, leading their design department, their digital design department, thinking I would only be there for a year. And then I'd parlay that into something exciting out on the West Coast, but really fell in love with the mission of Nationwide, protecting what matters most for people. And it was on the UX team. And it's kind of like everything came together where I finally had the job I wanted when I was 13 years old, watching the Super Bowl with my dad. So it was a long road, but it was a very exciting road. And I wouldn't change any of it for anything because I learned a ton along the way.
Yeah. Well, as a, my career has been as a consultant primarily. I actually, CompuServe was one of my first clients.
Oh, yeah.
And we were doing out-of-box experience for CompuServe. Remember when they shipped you the little CD and you had to, and we found out like 5 of 6 people couldn't actually, start the service.
Couldn't install it. Yeah.
So the first moments of truth were really, a challenge, but it also, for me, really launched this idea that, everything that we make, impacts how we work, live, and play.
Yeah.
And so how do we make sure that we really understand how to design things that add value to people's lives?
That's right.
And so I love that. I love that story. And seeing so many organizations in my career, one thing I'm always impressed with is just how Nationwide it's always kind of been a little bit ahead, especially like this, sometimes you think about insurance and you think about, well, is it just about fear, uncertainty, and doubt or whatever?
Right.
No, it's not. You're protecting the things that people, have built their whole lives around, their family and their homes and things like that. So it's a highly emotional, experiential area. And so I've really enjoyed, working with you in that area, but just impressed with how the organization has grown. So maybe tell us a little bit about your team there at Nationwide.
Yeah, and it has grown a ton. So when I started, I do think there were 7 to 10, let's call it 7 to 10 folks when I started there. And I've been with Nationwide for 17 years now, which was, originally not the plan, but have absolutely loved the way we've grown. And when I started, it was more of your bread and butter UX, more evaluative research. Basically you had your feature backlog and you're working off the feature backlog and you're running users through testing. We didn't really have permission or really the team to be able to look too far ahead and get into that more generative space. So that happened over time. And it really was really intentional how we've built that up. Kind of getting permission to go one step further. So one of the first competencies we added on was more that generative research, really uncovering unmet needs, thinking about kind of new to world or new to industry products and services that can help protect people and moving into that area. And then moving a little bit into the strategy space, like really determining that we could be good allies with the business strategy folks as they were thinking about how does the business succeed in 5 years. We're making sure that we're thinking about, well, what are customers going to need in 5 years? How are we bridging that gap and making sure that all of those roads come together at some point? We kind of started moving into the CX space, which is so interesting. And another thing I love to talk to other leaders about, where is your CX organization? Is it the same as your UX organization? Where are you organized inside your enterprise? We started learning more about CX because when we started thinking about things from a journey perspective and not a product perspective, it immediately bounces you out of the digital channel. And you start thinking about all the different interactions that folks can have with Nationwide or the company that you're working for. And then that leads you to more of this like journey-centric, customer-centric approach. All of a sudden now you have to be allies with the folks in the call center and in operations and in claims management because the ideas you have for improvement bridge across all of those silos. And now with generative AI, it's sort of like the next evolution of things. Like, how are we thinking about the experience that folks want to have with a generative AI solution? What do they need to know to trust it? If the associate's working with it, what do they need to feel comfortable with it? So one of the things that I love is that it always feels like there's room for the value that the team provides to the organization to expand as technology and expectations from customers change.
There's so much to unpack there. The one thing that strikes me about insurance specifically is that when consumers buy a product, it's sort of like the promise made. And then supporting the experience is kind of like the promise kept, and you win or lose customers in that equation. For me, especially in insurance, I love when you say it's not about the digital experience, it's really about the whole experience. And it's especially crucial when things in your life don't go well, because that's when you need, your partner in this case, the product that you purchased, the investment that you've made in the relationship to come to life. And I remember working early with Nationwide on all different aspects of this, but like the call center, you talk to your agent and then you'd call the call center and they would ask you all the same questions. And it was like, there was no sense of who you are, and that experience, the relationship didn't move with you across the journey. So I love the way you're thinking about that now. And even some of the things you mentioned, CX, it's been really interesting to see the evolution of CX, right? Now CX went from being a call center to now doing customer journey modeling and personas and having experienced core values. Tell me a little bit about how that's changed. I'm thankful that some of your leadership have moved up to that level,
right?
Which gives you some connective
It does give
tissue.
you some connective tissue, which is fantastic. But yeah, I mean, I think our first foray strictly out of the digital business came after I presented to some of the leaders in our property casualty lines of business. And we're just kind of like showing them the magic of UX and listening to your customers and, what that can do from a business results perspective. Mm-hmm. And I get a call the next day from one of the contact center operational leaders saying, like, I really need your help with this. And I'm super jazzed because it's a new channel and we get to do work on it. And she's like, okay, I need you to reduce personal lines call volume by 50% next year. And I was like, okay, well, we can stop publishing the number on everything, but I think probably we're going to have to take a more comprehensive approach to this. Yeah. So we worked with her to uncover, like, what are the top call drivers, all your standard contact center stuff, but then went that level deeper. Like, where are people first looking for the information? What should we add to the digital channel so they can self-service there and eliminate those calls? How do we make them aware of those new capabilities so they can actually find them instead of just picking up the call? And then when do people really, really need to just talk to a person? Mm-hmm. There are certain times when that promise needs to be kept and like something traumatic has happened to you. It doesn't matter how good our online system is. They're going to want to talk to a person. Right. They want that reassurance. Right. That's one of our customer experience principles, reassuring. Mm-hmm. So we just wanted to like delineate, okay, when are the times they're absolutely going to have to call? How do we better train the call center reps to like be first time final there and to think proactively about what the next couple of calls could be after that? Right. So they're solving that all in the first call. And then how do we make people aware of the digital enhancements that we're making for things that people would frankly rather not talk to someone about? They just want to be able to do it themselves.
Yeah. From a maturity standpoint, the role of CX has really changed in the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years, maybe. Almost every enterprise level CX program or organization that I talk to now is doing customer journey mapping and personas, things that we were doing at product and service level, right?
Right.
So tell me about that. Is that just a recognition from leadership that we have to go beyond just answering the phone to really understanding the complete customer life cycle? Or how did that evolve? And what does it mean for the work that you're doing across the enterprise and down into the product and service level? Because I think that's where some gaps exist now, or maybe even some competition for who owns the knowledge of the customer and what we're going to do. So.
Yeah, and that competition can be real messy, and we probably could have a whole separate session on that. We've definitely experienced it because you start to grow your UX competency, and you might get the marketing team concerned. Well, we do the customer research, right? The strategy folks, we do the customer research. So there's a lot of different people who have similar goals, and we can always align on the goals. We're just trying to make this better for our customers and then figure out who's doing what. But at Nationwide, we did have this more mature UX team. This is probably going back in the time machine now, about 7, 8 years ago, a pretty mature UX organization and a really nascent CX organization. So it was happening in pockets in the call centers. And at the time, UX was organized up under marketing. So we reported to the marketing leader, and he asked me to kind of deliver a strategy. Like, what would a CX strategy look like? And I worked with my business partners and another executive to, go out and ask them, like, well, what are you looking for? Well, they didn't even know what they were looking for. They didn't know what they were missing. So it was kind of a journey we went on together. How could this be a little bit different? And journey maps came up in that. Right, here is a way to get people to think end to end. Right. And it took a minute for me to understand that when I said end to end, I was talking about the different phases of the customer journey, the different moments of truth. Right. But business leaders and operations people were thinking about end to end from top to bottom. Like, what are the business processes and what are the technical systems and the limitations and the rules and like the state, the local and federal governance. They were thinking end to end that way. Yeah. And that was a real aha moment that we're speaking different languages. So we had this business language, this UX language, and this nascent CX language that we were trying to build a system around so that we could be most efficient. So we started growing a CX competency within my team, where we really were thinking about like, what are those customer experience principles? Can we align around 3 words that the entire organization will use in any role to help deliver a better customer experience? And that's a lot more focused on how are you working with your HR department to build out the training for that? How are you putting measures in place so that associates are measured against delivering that? So that's a whole other part of it that was new for the UX team and was really fascinating. Like people loved leaning into that and learning their way into it.
Yeah. One of I think the most important things I've learned is that nobody comes to work saying, I can't wait to create an experience that my customers hate.
Right.
Nobody has that
Nobody
goal.
says that.
So when we can really leverage that and say, okay, well, here are the tools that you can use to be customer centric.
Right.
I love the idea of this sort of, I think you call them experience core values or
principles.
The principles. Yeah. How do we operationalize those at every touch point of the journey so that we know how to turn those ideas into real experiences. And then you mentioned metrics too, which I think is another area that I think is so important to our profession when you see the amount of investment that's going into a capability to deliver on experience. Organizations, leaders are starting to ask, is that investment paying off?
That's
and in fact, when I saw the huge influx during the pandemic when everybody was a UX person and they just hired a million of them, and then to see it sort of go the other way after, it was sort of a little bit of a signal like we didn't get it done, and instead of, so now we have to, recover somewhat, I suppose.
Reputationally, I think we do need to recover some. And I think it's an important lesson on having a parallel path approach. If you are fortunate to work for a company that has decided to invest a ton in a UX competency and build that competency, and particularly if you are the leader who has been hired to do so, and you have been given a lot of money to quickly hire 10 to 50 people to build this UX team, it is really critical that you parallel path your workload so that you are delivering value right away. Like you cannot wait 3 months, 6 months, 9 months to deliver value. You need to find a quick problem to solve that you can measure. And this is where I would go back to call center opportunities, because the operations team knows exactly how much each call cost. Yeah. And if you can measure that you've reduced calls even 2%, 5%, that is, those are dollars that you can put on a sheet and talk to people about. And that nothing succeeds like success. That gets you invited to the party more. And then you can start thinking about those, like for us, more interesting problems that are a little more creative and a little further out and a little more complicated. But the business really wants their problem solved right away. So if you can do a couple of those for them, you're setting yourself up to not have the spigot turned off in a year because they're not seeing what they thought they were going to out of that investment.
Yeah, so connecting your work to real tangible business results and to business KPIs, I think is critical. And telling the story. I think for some reason, UX people tend to be pretty good storytellers.
Yes.
I mean, in fact, I think user experience is the unifying language across the organization. You were talking about how, the organization thinks about technologies and policies and procedures. In other companies, it's like manufacturing is talking about chamfered edges and tolerances, But the thing that everybody understands is a story about experience. So when you can talk about what are the barriers to it and how you created facilitation to, for it, and then you can tell that story, it gets you the traction that you're looking for, I think. And so I think as good as UX folks can be at doing the work, sometimes we don't tell our story well enough, And
sometimes we tell it too well, or we tell it from our perspective too well, right? Because we are naturally very empathetic people who want to solve these problems. Yeah. And I am guilty of falling on that sword too many times, and then it's just not as effective as I wanted it to be. And so what I have found is I have to vary the blend of the heartstring and purse string story and weight it differently depending on who I'm talking to. Right. I have some, business partners who are just very analytical, and I can tell half of a heartstring story and they're like, yeah, I get it. It's important to people. Yeah. But then it needs to be followed up with purse strings. Sure. And I have other folks that I partner with who are like, okay, if I can bring them 3 sound bites of experiences that went really poorly or disappointed our customers, which we never want to do, they're all bought in because they don't want to hear that. People cannot unhear audio. So if you have an opportunity to do like quick video diaries or things like that and bring that to your meetings, it's so much more impactful than the PowerPoint version of the story. Yeah. It can really do a lot. You just can't overuse it. So for me, it's been a journey of finding the right blend of those two things so that I can be as effective as I want to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for us too, I think it's not always about the emotional, empathetic thing for the customer. That's a critical thing, but you also have to connect it to business results and real concrete, like what are we, in our case, we're here to not only create great experiences for our customers, but to make sure our business can survive and that people can get paid and stuff like that. So I agree with you. I think we have to tell the business value story as much as we can tell the customer experience story. Maybe even more so. Maybe we need to lead with that to get people's attention. And then we can show how we did it through experience. And then all of a sudden that becomes like, oh, we can wield that as a tool to do better and to differentiate and to do all the things that businesses want to do.
Absolutely. It's a good formula. Yeah. Hey, business, I see your business problem.
Yeah.
Your returns are this. You need them to be twice as much.
Right.
Here are some barriers that might be getting in your way. Yeah. This is the experience part that I can help you with. Like, here's what we know about what's disappointing people. Here's what we think fixing it will do. Yeah. So that's like a nice, simple formula that you can use with your business partners.
That's great. Yeah, I love it. The other thing I think you can do is you can go off of what the business is already measuring. So one of the things I love nowadays is almost every business. For a while there was customer satisfaction. We're going to measure satisfaction.
Right.
And then it was like, okay, well, satisfaction went up or satisfaction went down. And everybody was like, okay, why? Well, we don't know, So, and then it was net promoter score. Right. And net promoter score intrinsically is a very simple, would you refer this service or product to somebody else? Which it's elegant, but it's not.
Loved for its simplicity.
Right.
But.
Yeah, but it doesn't, it's not, it doesn't tell you, it's not diagnostic, right? It doesn't tell you what to go change. And it doesn't tell you what it doesn't predict what the market will say necessarily. Right. So I think some of our work can get much more granular. It's one of the reasons I like experience metrics. It's one of the areas that Lextant's really focused on right now. And it's based on some of our desired experience work. In fact, some of the words, that you're using for your core values, I think, may have been based on some of that work we did together. But now we have that. Now we have these core values. Like, let's use those as measures and connect those to business KPIs and show, hey, when we can deliver more, of X, then we get Y.
Yeah, you guys have developed a great system of metrics for experience, and I think it is so critical that people look at it. I mean, as attractive as the elegant solution is, it's those metrics are very lagging, and like you said, it's very hard to quickly drive real improvements off of them. Yeah. So you need other things that are further upstream that can kind of help catch that on the way in. So you're not running around with your hair on fire at the end of like JD Power.
Right.
The month that JD Power reports get released, I mean, like a bunch of your listeners tonight right now are like kind of cringing because they're like, oh, I know that fire drill. And then everybody's mad about it. Why did the score get this way? It kicks off this flurry of activity, and motion doesn't always mean progress. But sometimes it's just like, I need you to take action now. And then you're like put into a corner trying to figure out what's the right way out of this. Yeah. So looking at those experience metrics up front, I think are critical and tying CPIs to KPIs. So you're thinking about both of those things at the same time. You're going to get a better result at the end that way by approaching it that way.
Yeah. There was a client that we worked with that won JD Power Awards for best new customer origination experience. And they won it every year. And they had no idea why. So they were afraid to innovate anything. Yeah. They were like, well, we're not, we don't want to tell you. And so it's like, well, let's make sure we understand what's happening in here. What are the levers and dials so that then we can amplify that and innovate even better experiences. So I think it's interesting. Those scores that you get, people get promoted and careers die sometimes on some of these
scores,
numbers. Yeah. But they're not necessarily the best measures, I think, of experience. So the more that we can provide the organization support, I think is important. So, so you mentioned some of how the growth at the enterprise level with CX. Really, it sounds like it allowed you to sort of accomplish your vision to go beyond digital and to really teach the organization that, this is not the thing, this is the experience around the whole thing.
Right.
And so you have an ally at the CX level.
Yeah.
I know some organizations are struggling a little bit with that connective tissue. How do you take some of the things that are coming from the enterprise level and make sure that you can either deliver those on the product and service level or vice versa, bubble up the things you're learning at the product service level to how CX should be thinking about what a successful experience looks like.
Yeah.
Because the moments of truth are down here.
Are down here.
Right.
Yeah. And because it's a podcast, you can't see we're pointing at different altitudes here, but it really is sort of an altitude. It becomes an altitude discussion, right? So when we were tasked with what are the key components of customer experience and how do we build that competency in UX or in it nationwide, not in UX, but we had some of it in UX. Eventually the decision was made to have a CX department. And a leader was put in place who reported right to the CEO. So that's fantastic. That shows you're like, you really, really for real care about this. We're adding this competency. And then to kind of kickstart off that leader and help set her up for success, I took a portion of my team and moved it into that organization. So I kind of like seeded her organization with my folks like talent and expertise. And partly that was for the good of everything. And partly that was really selfish because I knew if I had my folks in there, we were going to be setting ourselves off on the right foot for having a good relationship, the two teams working together, because now there's two teams and we have to have all those conversations about what happens at what level and how do we partner. And honestly, for the first year and a half, it was a little bit sticky in the middle because it is very hard to snap a chalk line and say CX happens over here and UX happens over here. Like that doesn't make sense. So we really started talking about things in terms of altitude. So when we were developing the customer experience principles, it was the CX team that took the lead on that. They owned that then.
Okay.
And they were the ones who went around and said, like, how do we distill all of these things, all of this customer research and insights and marketing and business strategy and experience strategy and distill it down into 3 words and then get the detail underneath that so it can be actionable in any area of the organization. So that's a very, very, very high altitude, right? And requires a lot of training and all of that. So they went to work on that. But we immediately took those 3 words, and when we were working with our business partners on, our usage-based insurance product and experience, mobile experience for that, we were applying Smart Ride. That's right. We were applying those experience principles to that work and helping our business partners like activate them in the design, coming out of the research that we had been doing with customers. And then we just consult with business partners too. We're UX folks, so we know how to apply, frameworks like that. We have a little bit more experience than other parts of the organization. So we'll just work on a consulting basis where we're helping them determine how to activate that in their area. But ultimately, they own the experience. The businesses own their own experience at Nationwide, and we are there to enable and support them.
So some clear delineation, I guess, from ownership and responsibility, but then also some common connective tissue. We talked about the importance of storytelling, metrics, and now, sort of these cornerstone principles that we're all, seeking to deliver on. Yeah, I think, when I started Lextant, I thought I was in the experience business, but the more I'm in it, I think I'm in the alignment business because I know you feel the same way too. It's like, how do I get this organization to agree on what problem we're solving or what, the success looks like? And then
how do we get there?
Yeah. And then
help
get
them
rowing in the
put
same
them on the
way.
path. Yep. One quick thing back on the metrics, we did do something, we approached metrics in our innovation area. So one of the groups that my team supports is innovation. And I have a whole, UX group, like 17 to 20 folks who work on innovation, new products, new services, or reinventing existing products and services. And, there was a significant investment in that group and they were expected to make quick results. And so what we started seeing is quick results means you do a little less UX and you do a little more quick, how do I get into IT and get this out the door? And we didn't want to sacrifice experience for speed. We wanted to be able to do both. So the director on the UX team who oversees that group built this system. It's the customer centricity metric. And it's basically measuring behavior. It measures the behavior of the team. The teams work together to identify, several critical customer-focused activities that they have to do in order to ensure the quality and a good customer experience. And then they're just marking off. Have they done those? Have they done those? So at the end of a project and throughout the project, that director will work with the innovation and UX team to score, like, how are your work behaviors? Are you thinking and performing in a customer-centric way? And it really is just measuring the behavior. But out of that behavior, you get a product that is more likely to be wanted by customers and used successfully by customers and have high satisfaction with, and that brings the business results. So it's kind of a quote-unquote sneaky way into doing like ensuring that you're delivering a good product with a good experience.
I love that. So so that's your own team.
Yeah.
You're not measuring other partners as part of that process.
We're measuring
We're
measuring an innovation pod. So the innovation pod is comprised of UX folks, the innovation product leader folks, and some technical folks.
Okay.
So that's the makeup of the pod. So it's measuring the behavior of the pod. It's to like really drive alignment. To your point, how can you get this pod to align around performing these customer-centric activities, good UX methodology, right? And make that not just UX's job. So the whole pod's getting measured, so they're incented to behave in a way that score is going to be high.
Okay. Yeah, so that's great. So you're measuring not only the organization's success, but your internal behavior of the team to make sure that you have a chance to succeed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's an earlier predictor of success of the product,
Follow
right?
the process,
if it has, follow the process.
User-centered design
you
works.
just do it. Just do it.
Yeah. I love that. So it's interesting to see how innovation has evolved then, because I know that was sort of an outside organization, and now that the organization still values innovation, but they want to see more timely delivery around it. Is that kind of
that's partially accurate. It also, we went through the very stereotypical arc of innovation at a large enterprise, right? Which is, it starts in a couple different places in the company with some forward-thinking leaders who aren't afraid to go off script a little and try things differently. They were real happy to use us, and that was fun. So we worked on those projects. We had a large investment in it where we stood up an innovation organization that was a little more outside of the businesses. Like, we built our own building, which was real fun. We got to like redo a movie theater and turn it into the user-centered design and innovation center. That was fantastic. But you can look around the corner and see what complications that might bring. Eventually you'll start to get asked, is it aligned enough with the businesses and what the business needs right now? So that's your typical arc, right? And then there's like a correction period. So you've got the pendulum all the way over here and all the way over here. And hopefully it lands somewhere nicely in the middle where you're looking far enough ahead that makes sense for the organization at that time, but you're more tightly aligned with what the business needs now. That's the way, back to kind of like those parallel paths I talked about earlier, right? Like, what are the ways that you can deliver value right now? And what percentage of your time do you need to be looking out into the future to ensure future success?
So longitudinally, but also like locally.
Yeah.
I think a lot of organizations have struggled with that innovation center idea. Everybody, like so many businesses stood them up, but they were somehow disembodied from what the organization had to deliver to be in business. And so there was impatience with it. And so there's a lot of this is like these, like, how do you translate what's happening in this part of the business to something real that's tangible? So I think one of the things I've been impressed with is just the way you guys have been able to do that, to look out enough to go from the micro to the macro, and then to go to a larger business level where the business acknowledges and recognizes that this stuff is important. I think those are indicators of a mature organization. Heidi, thank you for your time today. We have so much more to unpack. Join me next week for more on Seriously Curious with my special guest, Heidi Munc. We'll dig into her secrets of effective design organizations and how her team operates today. Visit us at lextant.com for more information on Seriously Curious.